In a world that walks the line, there's a rare few who think outside the box together for the crew. To break the equations, not bound to any rule. Exposing to the world the universe's own view. It takes the talent of the craftsman, it takes the mind of the fool, to make the vision realize energy and matter in a duel. To a break, to a duel.
Hello everyone, my name's Old Man Builds, otherwise known as Nathan, and we have Joe here, or the Straight Dope. What's going on, Joe?
Hey Nathan, hey everybody. See, for those of you that thought time travel doesn't exist, here we are on Saturday, and it's Sunday.
Yes, very much so. We all lost a little time there on that one.
Yeah, it happens. You know, things come up, but we do our best. So thanks for working with me and joining us today on a day of rest, everybody.
Right on. So what we got going on today, Joe?
Well, I think that, you know, after we had talked a bunch of times and then I talked to some people in the chat and stuff, I think that, you know, maybe going a little bit into hemisync, hemispherical synchronization, some of the meditative practices, how I personally go about it, you know, how maybe some people can incorporate that into their own lives to kind of, you know, see things a little bit differently. And a lot of the research and stuff that was behind it. And interestingly, how, you know, it makes a connection with all of the different energies and fields that everybody is using here to try and, you know, get different effects out of their coils. Because it does turn out to all be relevant, and hopefully I can show you that today.
Right on.
Yeah. So, yeah, where to begin with this? All right. So this story, my story with it at least, starts before the release of some classified CIA documents. Okay, probably in about like 2010 or 11, around that time, I started experimenting with just some basic meditation and incorporating binaural beats into those meditations. I really kind of discovered binaural beats by accident. I was just kind of looking for some Zen type sounds, peaceful rain type stuff or whatever, to just put on to drown out some of the ambient noise and stuff while I was trying to, you know, meditate and, you know, explore that. And then I came across binaural beats. And when I started using binaural beats, I didn't really understand the full extent of why they worked. Okay. But I did notice that they took what was just like basically a calm meditative state that I was able to achieve at that point in time, and kind of break the block as far as like how far I could take it. And I don't think that at that time I really even understood how far that does assist in breaking all these little roadblocks that you might not even know exist. You might think you're getting everything possible out of your meditative practices that you can be, but you know, this shows you time and time again that there's always another barrier to break down, which is super cool. So that's when I had discovered it. Now I don't know the exact year, so don't quote me on it, but there was declassification that occurred prior to me discovering any of this, of a CIA document that an Army general was tasked with doing research on different states of consciousness. And it was actually a binaural beats program that he had discovered that ultimately led him to his research in this particular report. Now that particular paper, even though it was released in the early 2000s or declassified, it didn't actually hit the public until like much after that. Like it maybe took like another 8 or 9 years for that document to even become available. So I didn't even know this was a thing at all at the time. But then ultimately I did discover it, and what I read blew my mind. And I felt like it was one of those documents where if you're actually going to try to tune into yourself and achieve higher meditative states, that it becomes really, really beneficial to read this document, because what it does is it explains all of the science behind why it works, how it works, what else it's connected to, and some of the abilities that people have found through the process. So the subject of this particular document was from the Department of the Army, dated June 9th, 1983, subject being analysis and assessment of gateway process. So the gateway process, if you want to think about it, is the process of breaking through that particular gate that separates mind from spirit and soul. And that's really what makes up the consciousness. So, you know, the general person that's just walking about every single day, they're in their mind. All the other things that, so Nathan, if you could drop the link in the chat.
Doing it right now.
Cool, thank you, appreciate it. Yeah, you guys could follow along a little bit with that and definitely check it out. But you know, the mind works as a gatekeeper, you know, and what bridges the gap between your conscious mind is your spirit, which ultimately connects up to your soul and your greater higher self, you know, and you have to be able to get through these gates in order to achieve the higher levels of consciousness. Now, what the purpose of this, you know, document, and I'll read from it a little bit. He writes, I begin the narrative by briefly profiling the fundamental bio-M word factors affecting such related techniques as hypnosis, biofeedback, and transcendental meditation, so that their objectives and mode of functioning could be compared in the reader's mind with the gateway experience as a model of its underlying mechanics as it was developed. Additionally, the introductory material is useful in supporting the conclusions of the paper. I indicate that at times, these related techniques may provide useful entry points to accelerate movement into the gateway experience. So again, the reading of the document is kind of a critical factor in understanding the mechanisms of what the binaural beats that they utilized in this process are doing. And it's that understanding that helps you actually make it happen even faster and to a greater extent. So what the document ultimately does is it defines your consciousness as a quantum physics mechanism. Okay. You know, and saying that it's basically part of a greater whole. And by, you know, being able to break through just the mind and the ego and all that sort of stuff, you'll actually be able to expand your consciousness in such a way that, you know, your senses perceive the world differently. And I could attest to the fact that, I mean, that's absolutely true through this process. You know, what it kind of goes into saying too is about how our senses that are given to us to explore our environment and experience our environment, you know, they kind of lie. You see, it's, you know, the raw data that is picked up by our ears, by our eyes, by our taste, by our smell, by our touch. It's all run through the mind and processed and then given to you in a way that's manageable, you know. But one great example of how, you know, like our vision is probably the number one sense that we depend on, and how we experience the world is how we see the world. But yet, you know, our eyes pick up the reflections of light off of objects, so to speak, right? The reflections of light, even that we get in our sense of color, okay, are actually the opposite of what that material is. So what's super interesting, if you want to think about it, is that when you see something that's green, okay, it's actually not green. It's everything but green. Green
That's
is what
crazy.
it's not taking in. It's what it's reflecting. And that's what you see and perceive. So it becomes a little bit of a deductive reasoning when you look at something and you're like, oh, well, that's green. You actually have to say to yourself, no, what I'm seeing is green. It is actually brown, and
Wow.
green is what is being reflected to me. And the same is just across the board when you're talking about any color, except for one thing, light. See, light doesn't suffer from that same effect because it is a source of emission. So when you see a light that is a coherent light source, let's say, and it's a certain color, that light is actually of that wavelength that is that color. It's not the reflection of.
Okay.
Which is actually why, if you mix paint, let's say, or ink or any two colors, you have one color chart. But if you mix light, you have a different color chart, because mixing light and mixing, reflected matter is not the same thing.
Okay. How did
Yeah.
your brain separate that?
Well, it's because of the experience. It doesn't know the difference between something being of true source color versus a reflection. So if it's an emission, it doesn't know the difference between an emission and a reflection. It just knows that it sees, the color. So when you're looking at an object and light's bouncing off of it, illuminating that object, bouncing back the color to you through reflection, you're getting the color that was bounced off of it. When you're looking at a light source, it still has the same sensors to pick up the color. The only difference being that it's actually coming from a source, not a source of, yes, I have Nag Champa going. That's exactly what it is. It's right in front of me. Yeah, so that's the difference with it. So the reason that I'm bringing that up is that this is one of the lies that our own sensory tells us regularly. We accept it as just what reality is, when in fact it's the total inverse of it. And we could go a little bit further into that later, but that's basically what it is. Helps you break these things down. So in the Gateway report, it connects the consciousness to quantum physics. And it does so by bridging the gap between the binaural beats and the quantum physics with the book that I continuously reference every single time I'm on here, Stalking the Wild Pendulum by Isaac Bentov. Okay. And, this book breaks down time, space, wave functions, all the quanta, from beginning to end, as far as kind of what it is, and then goes into states of being able to manipulate all of those energies, and then ties it into consciousness and how to basically jailbreak your mind to stop seeing the world as a load of horse manure, schmanure.
That's
Yeah, and realize that horse manure is probably purple and blue and not brown, and that's sort of the deal. All right, so now that they have the connection between the quantum mechanics, energy, and mind. Now, the manipulating it part, how they ultimately came up with that was by looking at different teachings, mostly Eastern esoteric teaching, Buddhist monks, different forms of Hinduism. But what they ultimately recognized the most was that the fast track to this was through these binaural beats. And in trying to look for someone that, had a great deal of experience with that, they found Bob Monroe, who was an audio engineer for a radio station, who had a deep fascination of, trying to learn in his sleep. Okay, so what Bob would do is he would buy narrations, and this was in the in the 60s, early 70s. He'd buy narrations of different stuff he wanted to learn, and he would listen to it as he slept. And what he realized is that he would pick up some of the information that he was getting while he was sleeping, like he would actually be able to pick up on some of this and remember it. But what he really found was that, you know, listening to it while he was sleeping at certain points would create like a bit of a disconnect. You know, and he ended up having an out-of-body experience, you know, and he was able to identify where in the audio recording that this kind of experience had occurred. And then he broke down the audio of it to try and see what it was that stimulated that response. And once he was able to do that, he started producing different sound waves that mimicked that particular part, and amplified certain parts of it. And then he found repeatedly that he was able to achieve out-of-body experiences. He went and analyzed the audio signals that were present, and then realized that it fit a certain criteria where there was crossover, there was destructive cancellation in certain parts of the pitches, and the pitch that was the offset between them, okay, was ELF. It was an ELF, an inaudible ELF frequency.
What's an ELF?
Extra long wave frequency. Okay. Yeah. So, you know, he realized at this point, and this is one place where it connects with the, you know, making coils and some of the stuff. You know, he realized that the same as tuning a coil, you know, you want to be able to get the coil to a maximum usable frequency, or muff. You know, so what he would do is he would go muff diving, and he would sit there and play with the little thing until he could get the frequency right and get the thing to scream at a high enough pace, and ultimately get it to shoot the spark. And then next thing you know, you were out of your body, or she was, or someone was. I don't really know, but oh fuck. It's just playing with the knob. That was it. I don't know, man. Look. Good old Bob Monroe. He didn't say that. I just made that up. Where was I? Yeah, so what he found was by achieving the maximum usable frequency, you know, in the right and left hemisphere, and having a small offset of extra long wave frequency in between, your brain would actually perceive those two tones as the offset extra long wave frequency. So something that your ears can't hear, your brain is perceiving. Now, okay, as you know, when you're talking like Schumann resonance and things of that nature, you're talking about extra low frequencies.
Like a higher consciousness at that point?
Well, that's one of the ways to be able to enter into it. Now, the way that he did it was he utilized specific frequencies for each lobe of the brain, okay, that would have certain particular effects on that side of the brain, okay? So the right side of your brain is the creative subconscious mind. It's what could kind of, it's not really bound to anything, but the one drawback that it has is it unquestionably accepts every bit of information, even bad information, given to it by the right side of the brain. Now, the right side, I mean, by the left side of your brain. Now, the left side of your brain is the logical part. So that's where your senses end up being rationalized with, and so on. So, you know, what he ultimately found was by putting certain tones into each ear, working the other lobe on the other side, okay, he was able to keep your logical brain awake. Okay, yeah, he was able to keep your logical brain awake so you could be aware. Okay, but he would put your body to sleep. You'd enter into a state of hypnosis by this offset beat and these specific frequencies being played in each ear. So that would allow you to achieve a sleep state in your body, reaching a certain base level of calmness that's very difficult to reach when you're awake. But usually when you go to sleep, you know, your mind shuts down. This keeps your mind awake while you're sleeping. So you're able to more or less lucid dream throughout the entire state of meditation that it puts you in. Now, as the program progresses, at first just brings you into what they call like a focus 10 level, which is a regular kind of Zen state, they would call it, you know, where you're relaxed, mind awake, body asleep. You're able to have clarity of thought, you know, internal peace, that sort of thing. Okay. Once you kind of learn how to get into that state through the binaural beats regularly, then you can move on to higher levels. In Focus 12, they call it. Focus 12 is a state of expanded awareness and consciousness. And you could actually feel, once you perfect that level, when you're coming up from the lower levels, you could actually feel and sense like an airiness, an openness, and an expanse. Okay. And you could actually be able to, at that point, detach a little bit, you know, from yourself and be able to see things more clearly, like not through our senses. And it's very intuition based at that point.
So let me ask you something. Is it, when you say that you states like that, like Edgar Sinclair was a psychic, right? He predicted Atlantis, but he went into a trance state. So is it like that, or is it something different?
Well, you can enter into trance states through it. This is more of when you're going, okay, so the gateway process, okay, is basically something that you have to do at your own path, okay, to be able to open up the different levels. And then once you get into those higher levels and you're able to access that, when you're actually conscious, if you focus and you reach a 0 point in yourself, you kind of got to hit the mute button on everything, right. Find that quick 0 point, but you could do it fast when you're learned how to do it. And then you could kind of close your eyes and pseudo enter into a like a micro trance. You know, you could enter into it, like you could induce it without the process of audio and all. You have
You're breaking up, Joe.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Can you hear me better?
Now I can hear you.
Yeah. I don't know how much of that cut out, but
so let me ask you something. You say right side, left side of the brain, right? So in a trance, would it be the opposite side of the brain that goes to sleep?
The key to any sort of effective meditation is putting your body at rest, okay, and having your body and your mind also at rest, to the point where the right side of your brain is sort of the acting character at that point, but not putting the left side of your brain totally out of commission. Like when you sleep, how you have no concept of time so much, and you could have a dream and not remember it. See, they consider that to be ineffective in terms of these meditative trance practices like that. Okay, so what they find to be effective is having the main character switch from the left brain to the right brain, but having the right brain still active enough to be a guiding force of the process, so all is not lost in terms of what you're actually trying to accomplish within that meditative state, and also have you be able to recall it after you come out of it. So you can't really shut down both sides altogether. It's more kind of like having them switch roles, where your right brain is your subconscious. It's not really readily available for
Hmm.
most people, to access what's deep in their subconscious. Once you break the ego down and then you ultimately hit higher states of consciousness, your right brain becomes a lot more available to you to explore and examine and check on than it is before this process. But you can't knock logic totally out of the park, because your right brain doesn't really think coherently. Your right brain believes in unicorns and leprechauns. And I'm not, are those things real? Probably not. Like, so if you let your right brain just run the show, that's kind of what you're going to get out of it. If you let your left brain have a say in the matter, then it becomes a whole lot more effective. You could actually have tasks and things of that nature to go into these meditations with.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Ingo
So-
Swann was a great example of that. He's a professional remote viewer. He worked for the Church of Scientology and the CIA.
Who is this again?
Hmm?
Who is it again?
Ingo Swann.
Oh,
Yeah. And what's it? Pat Price.
okay.
Yeah, those two guys, they were both high order people in the Church of Scientology that basically double agented themselves into the CIA, and used the CIA as like a springboard for a lot of their training and stuff. But they were reporting back to the Church of Scientology all of their findings, and they did some weird stuff for the Church of Scientology. Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yep.
Double agents, huh?
Yeah, and the Church of Scientology, not to really go all too far into that, but that stuff is nefarious. Like they're
They're into everything.
yeah, they're into everything, and I can't say that it's all good stuff.
Yeah. Well, stay out of that.
Pretty much, exactly.
Yeah. So right side and left side are communicating most of the time. When they don't, so when people have breakdowns and stuff like that, one side takes over. They're kind of delusional sometimes. Is that kind of what's going on there? And then
Yeah, I mean, when people have imbalances, generally speaking, that imbalance is a little, it's not all dissimilar to what we're discussing. It's just a negative effect that they naturally fall into, where they have a negative disposition in their life, that has negatively impacted the functioning of the right side of the brain to be, rather than optimistic or even neutral in any regards, it just runs into negative all the time. And, it starts conjuring up all of these, negative what if scenarios, that then leaks through to the right side of the brain. And then they start processing that more as a probability rather than a long shot, worst case scenario possibility. And once that leak of negativity enters in, and it becomes truth because the right side of the left side of the brain believes it, now all of a sudden you have intrusive and spiraling thoughts, which is a main source of mental illness in people.
okay,
Yeah.
So let's talk about the higher level now. Let's get
Mhm.
into that, because that's really where I wanted to go with this whole thing.
Sure.
If you don't mind. The higher level of consciousness and get to what do they call that? That big thing in the sky, or whatever they say it is, the consciousness that has all the information.
The Tao.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
How-
Tao. Or the Akashic Record is what you're
Yeah.
probably referring to. I'm talking about a bigger picture thing, I guess. But yeah.
Well, go ahead and explain both.
Well, I mean, it's very hard to kind of like quantify this and articulate it. At the end of the day, there's like in Hinduism and Buddhism, they believe that we're more or less a dream in the thought patterns and the brain of a god, so to speak. That's what they believe. Now, could be pseudo metaphorical, or you could take it as reality. At the end of the day, like you know, everyone's consciousness could just be a small agent of the thought processes of something larger, and in the subconscious of something larger. And ultimately, that would kind of explain why, the crowd voice, the crowd opinion ultimately manifests more of that, because that's what ends up leaking through. You wanted to think of it like that. I mean, there's the universe in itself, resembles large neural networks and synapses and different signals traveling from point A to be received by point B to what effect. We don't know what the big picture looks like, but we know, as above, so below, what that means on the human level, through our own nervous system, through our own brain processes, and the similarities tend to be striking. So, what this manifest of reality ultimately is anyone's guess, but to believe that we're all a small part of the same, to realize that all life generally, but human life specifically, has an exuberant energy. I mean, it's a long shot grasp, I guess, but I mean, I personally believe, for no reason I can prove, that the human energy, is actually a plasma force. That's what I think. I think that the human energy is a plasma force. So I think that when you die, that plasma force, ultimately rejoins, what it came from. And when you think about the stories and depictions of heaven, and then you start to look at some of these different meditative processes, but also the after death religious type scenarios that are discussed. And then you start thinking about these UAP reports that they have with plasma balls, ball lightning, different plasma forces chasing about each other and then combining into one, and finding themselves into thunderstorms to charge themselves up and then leaving, or going around different objects and kind of exploring. I mean, a lot of it kind of makes sense. See, no one person's plasma force may be that particularly strong to do that on itself. But if you're sending that back where it came from, when you pass away, or if you're temporarily detaching from it in high meditative states, it combining with more plasmatic forces and stuff to, be a possible mechanism for some of these unusual things that they're seeing and stuff. I think that that's a possibility, because they're basically saying that plasma is the bridge of the gap. And I've said this too before I even heard anybody else say this, but plasma bridges the gap between energy and matter. So realistically, it makes sense why that. And I even went as far before I had heard this, because I didn't look into this on a more formal basis until even very recently, a couple of days ago. They're saying that I called it the animating force of matter, maybe a couple of weeks ago when we spoke. And then I had actually heard that come up in conversation, after the fact. So like an animating force. Yeah. It's all, like I said, this is all, and it's all super out there stuff. This is all the super out there next level stuff. So I'm not saying any of it's true, or that, I firmly believe, definitively and unquestionably believe any of these things, but there's logic behind it. That's what it boils down to.
Well, I believe in that conscious state where you meditate and put yourself in a whole different frame of reference completely in your mind, where you shut some stuff off and it basically shuts down both sides to a quiet state. And then you could take one idea out of the whole thing and look at it in depth and then configure what's going on around that idea and how it's functioning. You know what I mean? It more in a mechanical sense, I guess, if you're looking at it like a clock and how to take it apart and put it back together in your head, it would be easier at that time because there is no noise. There's no chemical process in your body that's using all the energy. It's all right there in your head where you can, maneuver. It's just running the rest of your body how it has to. But that part's the one that's really getting all the activity going on.
Now, when it comes to that, and then also how that relates to like Akashic records, how I look at Akashic records is a little bit two-step. Okay. And what I mean by that is there's or maybe even three-step. We'll call it three-step because 3 is a better number.
Okay.
Now, the first step is the step that every single person more or less undergoes. Okay, regardless of where you're at, and that's in sleep. So when you sleep, there's a certain defragmentation of your mind that occurs that allows for, hopefully, you don't have so much built up, a little bit of a clean slate, so to speak, to be able to enter into new experiences, new thought processes, new things without all of the annoyances surrounding it. And that's step one, and it really just happens for everybody while they get some sort of productive sleep. Now when you start to go up into step 2 of that becomes the more advanced form of that. Okay, and what that means is you're not really on this up and down slope anymore, that you're either in meditation or in sleep. Your defragmentation processes are highly effective, and they're able to sort the information into more and experiences into more digestible and understandable quantas, and then they're able to draw then connections between this information, that you already know, and make it be meaningful to you, where possibly before, it was just in a cloud of, of random, so it's an organizational and connection based process that occurs in people that are at more of a 0, who participate in meditative practices or good sleep or are generally healthy and well-minded. That stage 2 is that next stage. Now, when you're in stage 2, you're never all that far off from hitting the stage 3. Okay, the stage 3 is a whole different ballgame, though. Okay, that means that you generally run at a 0 all the time, And when you generally run middle of the road, okay, you feel the good, you feel the bad, you experience it. It gets sorted where it has to be properly from the get-go. The connections are already made, and now because the connections are made, these new bits of information are kind of going into a place that makes more sense in the first place, and then can be further sorted as life goes on. Once you're at that point, the next stage is, being able to get into the greater connective consciousness of perspective. Okay. So whenever you're able to remove yourself then from your own self, look in at your own self, and then look at everybody else around you, you start to get a lot more information. Okay, because now it's not about you coping through all of your nonsense. Now this is about ascertaining information from everything around you from an external perspective, and then dumping it into the same bank where everything else came from. Now, all of a sudden, you're coming up with stuff that you never even thought of because you're seeing things you never even saw. And that's realistically what it is. And it is a collective consciousness. But to what degree, whether your brain is actually connecting to a cloud of information that everybody can access, or whether you're just now hypersensitive to the different variations on either side of your zero that you're constantly at, that allows you to be able to do this and sort it properly. And now all of a sudden there's all this information that maybe consciously you didn't even pick up on. That's kind of the key. Consciously, maybe you didn't even pick up on the fact that you saw this, but your brain did, and that's the Akashic record, where like once you access it, it's, you might have a thought or a question consciously. And when you access that Akashic record through the deeper states of meditation, then you come out, maybe a couple days later or something, and then all of a sudden it comes to you. It's like given to you. Or sometimes your intuition will show you something that now you're sensitive to. It'll point you in the direction, bang, there's your answer. It's all intuition. It's being psychic is real, but being psychic isn't magic.
Yeah. No, I get that. You sometimes glimpse at something, you don't pay attention to it, but your brain perceives all the information, stores it, and then something triggers it later, and then all of a sudden your brain explodes with all its information. I've had that. That's a weird feeling, man, because it's like an instant download into your head of everything that's going on at that moment for that thing. So
yeah, that's exactly what it is, man. And it's the more clarity that you ultimately achieve that way, the easier it is for you to start creating the things in your life that you want, whether it's in a project or a problem that you've been stuck on, or a life issue or whatever. It allows you an external view of it, lots of information about it, and then all sorts of different paths to take. And once one of those paths come about, it like lights up, just like there it is, and it's very cool when that happens. Yeah,
I love it when you get to that dream state in like the last 5 minutes of your dreams, where you're starting to become conscious, but your whole body's still in that relaxed state, and you're not quite there yet, but you're kind of there. And then things start to populate in your brain at that point that you'll be able to remember and perceive, in that dream state. So now you can work things out a lot better in that time. Or it shows you an identifying factor that you didn't know before. Mm-hmm. And I asked about the psychic thing because sometimes maybe that's all that's going on, is they're pulling out that identifying factor they didn't know before while they're in that state.
Yeah. I mean, when you can look at somebody, let's say you're going to a psychic, right? And you're getting a psychic reading, when a person on the other side of the table to the person that's getting the service, so to speak, right, is, from the moment they walk in to the moment they begin speaking, to sort of like, well, what brings you here and this and that, it's a form of like white magic psychology in play.
Yeah.
You're dealing with somebody who is at a zero in themselves and is basically looking you over subconsciously and making little check marks in boxes all over the place. And all of these little tiny check marks tells them exactly kind of where you're at and where you want to be and maybe what brought you here. And, then the line of questioning that's always like, I mean, who is this to you, and stuff like that. That's stuff that comes out of intuition, and it's very crazy.
Sounded like my wife there for a minute. Knew everything that I was thinking, the conversation in my head, and she was having it before I even got there.
Yeah.
So,
well, my experience with women's been very similar, except they generally get the intent wrong. So
Yeah.
they need to tune themselves to that better because yeah, okay, yep, what you're saying, except that's not what I meant by it. So maybe you want to hear me about that. But hey, throw my hands up.
Yeah, I totally think that there's a higher state of consciousness, and it goes deep into your soul of who you are and how you handle things. And it's like, do you let things linger? Do you close the argument? Do you know what I mean? Are you satisfied with who you are as a person? Can you get over your shortcomings in the past and forgive what you did to yourself? Not necessarily everybody and what they did to you, but you have to forgive yourself first. You know what I mean? If you had a part to play in any of it. And I think that part goes into your soul. And then you can start to reach these higher states. And without that, it's really hard to get yourself at that 0 point where you can even start to meditate at that point.
It's true. I think that the number one thing that I see in people who I could say need this. So you can't, first of all, you can't ever tell anybody what they need. That's first off. And every single thing about all of this, you can't even teach a man to fish. All you could do is expose that it exists and then they have to discover it. Everything with this has to be a self-discovery. There's nothing anybody can tell you, and it goes back to like old Gnostic teachings, and where that word even comes from. Gnostic, or Gno. Instead of K no, you Gno. The fact is that there's a difference between something you believe and something that and what is the differentiating factor is discovery and experience. Something you believe is something that makes sense to you that you've been told, but to know something means to have actually discovered and experienced it firsthand and then been honest in its interpretation. And where people go wrong most of the time is that they're just not honest with themselves. And they think that that's harmful. That's harmful to them. They'd rather attribute whatever they have going on as cause and effect, not of themselves and their role, but rather what other people have caused them. And then that's what the emotional, the emotional like static, comes from. Is all this blame, and then that goes into forgiveness. So it's like the first thing that you have to really learn in any of this is don't worry about what anybody else did. Where am I honestly, and what did I do to be here right now?
That's
Not
right.
is it fair, not what did it cause, no, but that shouldn't have happened. None of that. That will be digested by virtue of eliminating it out of the equation and processing yourself, being honest with yourself. If you don't do that, there's no zero to be achieved.
When you can reach a 0 point, you start to feel the energy of others and what it's like whatever the good feelings you have about yourself, it puts off an aura of yourself to others, and then they respond in kind with theirs. And you can kind of tell who the good and bad people are and their intent before they open their mouth. You know what I mean? Or, just something in it, and I can't describe it. It comes down to the simple teaching. Can you walk up to the 7-Eleven with that $1 in your pocket to get that soda pop, and then a homeless man asks you for that $1, do you give it up? And it's not because you think you have to. It has nothing to do with your morals. It's just who you are as a person. You know what I mean? And that kind of aura is unbelievable in being centered within yourself.
It really is. And thanks for the $1, by the way.
Thanks for the $1. Nice.
No, man, you're dead on. That's exactly where it's at. It's just all a matter of being able to nail that 0 point. There's a lot of resources out there of people that will share their own experiences with you about it. But the fact is that their experience and yours are two different journeys entirely,
Yeah.
and that's why, and again, what you subscribe to, where the information is, it doesn't really matter because it's everywhere, it's within yourself. But like, if you go through the full 33 degrees of Freemasonry, there's a process, there's resources, there's people that will point you to where to get the information. There are people that will tell you, yep, you got it, or no, you didn't, out of what you summated, out of whatever you read, or, the context of it, whatever have you. But what you got out of it's ultimately going to be significantly different, than everybody else. But that's realized, and it's never given to you because nobody else could give you what only you could give yourself. And that's why that process to this day, and I'm not a Freemason, but I know people who are, that's that process. Now, where it ends, like, you go all the way to like a Scottish Rite Freemason, all the way to the end. And nobody could really teach you further than that. It's either you grasped it at that point and you've made the connections, or you just knew enough to get you through. But practicing all this stuff is extraordinarily different. And that's why I always bring up the dynamics with all the different field interactions that occur within a coil, because all the different field interactions and what you get out of it, you can control that. But unless if you have a bubble, then it's just a whole bunch of shit interacting with all the rest of the shit, and it goes to waste and squander. It's that bubble that keeps it in. That bubble in context of this is your own self-control. That is knowing what you know, knowing how to apply it, when to apply it, and not letting the external forces screw with your inner workings.
Yeah.
You have to manage the external forces by virtue of maintaining your, separate locality, so to speak. At the same time, you got to be able to let things in and out too.
Oh yeah. No, I understand that.
So
You're always
yeah.
emotional in a certain time, and then you got to be able to drop it and let it go, and just be good with it. And whatever it is, and let your mind be at peace. So
that's it.
I think it. Hold on, just real quick, because we always talk about UFOs and stuff sometimes. And if you're ever going to run one of those with your mind, if you're not centered, you're never going to fly it. You're just going to crash. So even though that's kind of like off topic, it still goes to your consciousness state. Like, are you accepting of what's coming next? Or are you in that state? Or is everything bogging your mind down so far you can't see the light? You can't see the next level of consciousness. You can't feel it. You're not in that moment. You have too much division in yourself to rise to that higher level. And it was funny because we were talking to, oh man, who were we talking to yesterday that said that? Gerald.
Yeah, Gerald more or less did. Mm-hmm.
And he was talking about crossing over, and you can't have the weight on your shoulders. You got to be as light as a feather. You know what I mean?
Yep, weighing your heart against the weight of a feather. That's the entire basis of the Egyptian Book of the Dead, which is it's a worthy resource of to read.
It just reminds me of that. I don't have any problem with that. I let things go. They just after a little while, man, they don't matter. They're in, they're out, like you said, and here we go. You know what I mean? Start a new day. It's a new chapter, and I don't need to ruin it with yesterday's problems.
That's it. That's it, man. It's it is all related to what you were saying. It's not unrelated in the least. As far as the same stuff that makes all of what I'm talking about possible are all just a variable of the same energies and interactions that occur within the coil systems. It works off of the exact same physics principles. It works off of the exact same, science. It's just ultimately, it's just a different way to do it, looking for a not all that dissimilar result. And that's kind of where that part of it's at. I mean, and it really does tie in even further when you start to get into the more weirdness of it. When you start to talk about, Planck's distance and time and space and all of that sort of stuff, it becomes a lot more relevant, because a lot of the highest states of this process in yourself will bring you to the same exact spot that this will bring a craft. It's the same exact spot. It's no different, and when you cross over Planck's distance, and everyone's done it, whether you realize it or not, it's a very surreal and weird experience. Now, most people will probably, experience it through a dream if you're not practiced in it. And in that dream, because you're not really fully in control of yourself or your mind at that point, it's just whatever it's presented to you as, so when it becomes more of a lucid dream and you're playing the role of yourself in your dream, it becomes a lot more interesting of an experience. When you cross over Planck's distance, okay, strange things happen in the sense of time and space. And what you'll often find is that you'll find yourself in a familiar place, okay, that's like a liminal space, okay, with only people that seem familiar to you, and you know who that person is, even though who you're looking at mentally in that moment might not even accurately represent that person. So, like for instance, when I reach those dream states or high meditative states and I enter into that, I often find myself in one of several different familiar, somewhat identifiable, but different liminal spaces that never end, and kind of loop, like it's stuck in time, but the interesting thing is that, like, people that have passed away, or people who I haven't seen in a very long time, can kind of be summoned in conjunction with strangers. It's never anybody that's actively in my life. Almost never in that scenario. And I've contemplated that before and been like, that's unusual, because, you would think, at the forefront of your mind is the people closest to you, the people that you interact with regularly, and that would be what's being decompressed in your head and what's manifest in your head in these deep states. But for me, at least, it's always people that have passed away, or people that are distant from me. And, I think that I made sense of that by saying, well, yeah, you can summon people who have passed. When you're in past Planck's distance, the energy is there. And it's not only is the energy there, but the space doesn't really make much of a difference. So it doesn't really matter where they are. They could be where you are. And where you are, like, is a place you're familiar with, but not now, not as it stands now. It's as it stood at another point in time, and you're just there.
So do you, like with other people, even if they're passed away, is it more of a energy echo in your head that they're there, or a remembrance of what they're saying and how they say it and how they would interact with you? No. Or is it something more?
Something more. It's never a memory-based thing. It's all relevant to where, meeting me wherever I'm at that moment. Like it's not a memory or something that we did or something like that. It's, hey, me, And it's like, oh, I know you, that sort of deal. And they already know exactly where you're at, and they can meet you where you're at, and you already know exactly where they're at. I remember a couple times when that first happened to me, I became like kind of emotional about it. And they were like, I was literally convinced that a friend of mine who had passed away, like not literally convinced, and that's not the best way to put it. I had to like contemplate in my wakefulness that my friend never died and they found him or something, because what I had experienced was so real in that dream state, that it seemed unlogical that wasn't the truth. But then I realized that I'm just perceiving this in consciousness the wrong way. He's there, but only in that state. And whatever confusion I'm suffering from at this moment, because of this, is because I'm bringing it into my waking reality, So it becomes very confusing a little bit at first, but like, as long as you're not insane, like clinically insane, then you could kind of make sense of it and separate it and realize the significance and appreciate it for exactly what it is, but also not sit there and start preaching the word of he's still here, he's still alive, go talk to him or something like that, because then you're a madman. Like you have to kind of know where it exists, why, and to what degree. Yeah.
When my dad died when I was a little kid, I would always think to myself, at some point, he's just going to drive home. You know what I mean? But he's not really gone. Even you see him in the casket, you see those other things, you just think, there's no way. You know what I mean? That person's still here. And then when you do something, I can hear his voice loud and clear in my head. And that's probably just an echo of a memory. You know what I mean? Like, but it's talking to me as an individual. So I don't know, you know what I mean, that you could separate all of it. Maybe it's just my mind telling me that's where his emotional process is and how he would perceive this situation. Maybe that's all it is. I haven't had the part where, you know what I mean, someone else could come to me and talk to me on one-on-one basis, like they're, you know what I mean, subconsciously there. If that makes sense to you. Like there's a difference in my mind letting go in that way.
Yeah, and that's what breaking through these different layers does for you. Realistically, is it it jailbreaks your mind. It's kind of what it boils down to. It jailbreaks your mind. It's and it's not for everyone, by the way. So this is not for everyone. Like there's a very, very fine line, between being able to experience these things and have them be a productive and meaningful thing within your life and have them actually be helpful. There's a very, very fine line between that and just being absolutely, positively, committably not well. And that's unfortunate, it is unfortunate, but like you really have to know where you're at and be able to monitor yourself through this stuff to be able to rationalize it, or else you're not going to be a functioning person. Because some of the stuff that you experience in these higher degrees of meditation, it's just as real or pleasurable as anything else that you've experienced in your waking regular day. So why wouldn't you want to relate more to that? I feel like for some people it's, and why wouldn't you just want to spend most of your time there then and whatnot? And, like that. And then people will just be like, they don't know the difference between real in context and real in physical reality, because these things are not manifest in physical reality. That does not make them fake. Okay. But it doesn't mean that that they apply to your waking self, So, I would hope that someone watching here would care about me enough if I said, I think that my buddy who passed away visits me and I see him and he talks to me and, like to put me away and because I'm unwell. Like, that's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is that there is a way to access and be able to appreciate these different elements of, the human mind psychology and how it connects with the greater whole, while keeping it in the reality and context of being a sane and normal human that understands what normal waking consciousness is, so tread lightly,
Yeah,
and
I
do it
get that.
do it naturally, like for what it's worth. I know people will take drugs and stuff. If that helps you, and I'm not one to judge. I'm just saying, there's a difference between having something given to you and thrown to you and you to make sense of it rather than you discovering those same exact benefits yourself. I could say that for my own personal experience, discovering it was the most beautiful part.
Well, you're ready to accept it, though.
I mean, I don't know that I was fully ready to accept it when it started coming into view. I think it scared me,
Well, it scares the living daylights out of me sometimes.
Have an out body experience. It'll scare you, man. Like it'll scare you. I didn't know if I was dead. I have no idea what's going on. And it's not all pretty either. Like, when sometimes like, you end up with like, what do they call them? Yeah, there's a name for it and it's eluding me. But sleep paralysis,
Oh,
like, when you unkey this, this hole, you become susceptible to things like sleep paralysis and whatnot, and then that's another thing that you have to learn to then overcome because, being awake while you're sleeping with your creative mind at play, but you can't move and you're freaking out and you don't know what's happening. Like, you need to rationalize through these things. These are that's a medical condition. Well, not condition, but, and sorry for that, but that's an event that occurs to people. That's a known phenomena. And it's never pleasant. But once you realize what it is and what's going on, you could also, yes, a hypnagogic state. It's exactly what it is. When you're right in between the cusp of sleep and consciousness, you go to sleep and you're still conscious. So that's what you're trying to induce through all of this, by the way.
I had a dream once after drinking too much, like a nightmare you couldn't get out of. And there was nothing bad going on. It was just that I'm completely awake during the whole thing. And I'm freaking out. You know what I mean? Because I'm not in control, but I'm fully conscious. And yeah, that wasn't a good experience.
Yep.
So
yeah, it's frightening. And even sometimes when I'm trying to, just the sheer intensity of the onset, and the onset's almost never identically the same. It's shocking even when you're expecting it, So.
Yeah.
But, very, very cool stuff, very, very real stuff, very, very studied stuff, and just bear in mind that the only thing that separates you at that point from somebody who's unwell is realizing what real reality, like real physical reality is. And not denying that, like that's.
No, I get that.
Yeah.
Well, I think training both sides of your brain and both sides of your body helps in everything, right? So, like, for instance, I've broken my right hand more times than I can count. And my left hand can write just as fast as my right hand now. I can play pool with my left hand, no problem. I can go swing a golf club better with my left side than I can with my right side because it's stiffer and has less motion in it. So just training some of these things to happen, you know what I mean, helps out your brain so much because now it's not one side dominant. It's one works over the other, you know what I mean? And then they start talking in the right language to each other. So, yeah, I've had that experience happen.
Yeah. You know, it's all very humbling stuff. It's all very cool. It puts physical reality perspective and all the invisible forces at work as far as like electromagnetism is concerned, and how your brain, your thoughts, your nervous system, everything like that puts out these same exact fields as the coil systems. You know, how you could actually put more power into your own system and have it emanate in a way not all that dissimilar than um a coil system. And the ultimate goal of like ascension, you know the coil systems are more or less, for metaphorically, they're nailed to the ground, and so are you. you know when but you can unnail yourself to the ground, you know and you can unnail that to the ground.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I always wonder, when we get together as a group, who exactly can go and sit with the monk, drink the tea, and have no food, and just be at peace for days. You know what I mean? And I think what's honestly crazy is I think every last one of them could probably shut their mind off to do it. You know what I mean? That's the crazier part, because sometimes you get somebody in that's just their mind rattles at 100 miles an hour that they just can't shut it off. So
Yeah. Well, I suffer from diarrhea in the mouth. I get it. It's like, and just sometimes you just gotta like try and catch it and be like, but
yeah,
catching it's the hard part.
I don't know. I don't know. It doesn't seem that hard to go into the state if you're willing. You know what I mean? It's when you're not willing that it'll never happen.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's true. Yeah, I'm looking at my list of things that I wanted to talk about. Let's see. We pretty much got through a lot of that. I did want to show do you have the mushroom pictures?
Oh,
not the ones from the video, the one that I sent you.
Give me 1 second.
It's only ironic that it was mushrooms. I just thought that it displays something really, really good that
it's not
might help some people out.
I shut off my Facebook sometimes because it's always going off. So just give me a second.
Yeah, and once you find it, start with one, and then we'll work our way up. Yeah.
Okay, I found it. So give me a second. I don't know which side's one in this. They don't number them.
Yeah, no. Well, you were at one a second ago.
Okay. So this one?
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
So that's just like a cross section of a mushroom, and it's actually like a monopole toroid. And you can actually see how the force, curls up into itself on the outer part. I really can't point to it, but how it wraps around and then comes back into itself, expands before it compresses.
Okay.
And if you go to the next one where there's two, you could see a regular torus kind of at work, and that's exactly the field shapes that you get when you have external magnetic forces, ultimately, coming in and condensing to a point. And you could see the point of compression in the middle. And you could also see how those forces are distributed evenly at the equator. That this would have poles at that point. And then if you go further, you start to see the increasing complexity of the internal structures of where they ultimately meet. So when you're dealing with like some of the more intricate coil patterns and so on, and you're actually getting like not three poles, but three separate magnetic fields that come into a certain common point. This is more the type of interaction that you're getting, and you'd end up getting more of a spiral out of this, because you know, this is obviously not moving, but you know, those fields are. So if you proceed a little further to like 4, you could start seeing the increase in complexity of a cubic structure. And I mean, it's beautiful. Like if you look at the middle of that, I mean, first that's like a cross. It's beautiful. But it starts to get more interesting as it becomes more complex. So here, if you don't mind,
Yeah.
continuing there. Yeah.
What's the next one?
Yep. And now you have pentagonal, and that's a hexagonal, this one. Okay. And now the hexagonal is important, okay, because do you see what's happening dead in the middle of this particular number? Is you have a point, you have a blank point in the middle. Okay. Now the reason that that's significant and the points in between the mushrooms up further are not significant is because when this is in motion, those other blank spots, they become diffused through that motion. But the center does not suffer from such a force. You know, this now you have a spiral with a hole. Now, where it becomes interesting is that it just now the more you add does not necessarily mean that you're going to have that phenomena. It's going to collapse at certain points and reappear larger as we go on. So here, continue to 7 now, or whatever it is. Yeah, so look at that one. That's the big hole. So there's 3 holes at 6, 7, and 9. Okay, and 7 and 9, those are the big holes, and then the little holes at 6. So I don't know which one to put it in, but this one looks pretty good. 7's a pretty godly number, and that's a pretty big 0-point hole that you have there.
A lot of mushroom heads in them holes, huh?
Lots of mushrooms and holes. See, I'm always connecting dots, trying to make a joke and make sense of it all at the same time. All right. And if you don't think this is sacred geometry, well, you know, I mean, then you're not looking at the same photos I am. So, you know, again, tying it all together. And I found this as a resource online when I typed in mushroom sacred geometry. I was like, you know, jackpot. Yeah, so this is 8, but go to 9, because 9 is...
I think that's 9 right there. That's the last
9
one.
has the most stable of the 0 points where they all meet. So, you know, it's 3 is actually where the spiral starts. 6 is where the 0 point starts, and 9 is where the 0 point expands to its highest degree.
This is actually a mushroom. This is the way they grow. Is this?
It's a cross section of a mushroom representing a monopole toroid.
No, I mean, but is it real?
These are just this isn't a mushroom growing.
Oh, okay.
These are just cross sections of a mushroom in how they would conjoin around the sphere.
Gotcha.
In different numbers. So, you know, each mushroom section would represent, you know, 1/2 of a bipolar torus.
Wow.
Yeah. And how they would combine in the middle. So again, if you put that in motion, then, and I don't know how to do that anymore with the software that I have. There was a point in time where I knew this. If you start spinning this thing around, you would actually start to see the emanation of the outer mushroom cap, so to speak, in a like a propagating wave type movement. Okay. The center of it would start a spiral, but again, the black void, so to speak, within that spiral would then become diffused because of that motion. But at the eye, the center, that maintains its integrity as a 0 point. Yes, Smurf houses. At least it's not Smurf holes, because that's just weird, man. You know.
I'm trying to keep a straight face, Joe.
Listen, there's some dirty cartoons out there. I've seen them when I was younger, much less mature.
Oh man.
There was also something I wanted to share last week, and it was super relevant then. And then I didn't even realize how awful that hurricane was going to be. So if anybody watching was, impacted by that hurricane, I'm horribly sorry, and I hope that you're getting through it. But I did I send you the hurricane pictures?
No, I don't know. Let me see.
You don't know? All right, sorry.
All right.
I could kind of describe what it
I
was.
got this picture right here of you on the road, I think.
Oh, you could show those.
And I don't know what this is.
Here, put it up and I'll tell you.
Sorry.
I'm
no
looking
problem. Through it.
I'll have to figure out a way to make this.
So there was
wait,
this one.
That's a photo negative. Okay, this is actually a cool photo because I took this one. So yeah, we have a very bright light about maybe 1,000 or 1,500 feet off the ground. Okay, which it was like kind of a hazy day. It had no sort of light dispersion from the source whatsoever, and it wasn't attached to anything. And I drove like 5 miles an hour underneath the thing, thinking it was a helicopter or something, but it didn't make a sound. So that was something interesting that I saw. It was very bright and weird shaped, and like it was only a light.
Okay.
There was nothing attached to it. I don't know if you could make it bigger and zoom into it or something, but I think I sent you a picture of a zoom in of it.
Let me see. Hold on. I don't know. This is
yeah. So that's what it looked like. And it screamed helicopter to me, except it wasn't.
Okay.
And it wasn't a drone. It was huge. And it was very, very bright. And not a sound. So I saw that back in June. Yeah, it was over a farm. I really don't know much more than that. I'm not alluding to anything, but it wasn't a helicopter. It wasn't an airplane. It was in my sight for about 2 minutes altogether because it's a very, very long straight road. And it never moved, bobbed, turned, nothing.
Really?
And the other weird thing was after I passed it, I couldn't see it in my rear view mirror. It was gone, essentially.
Really? Gone to reflection, huh?
Yeah. So like at first I was like spotlight, whatever, but I just like I'm just trying to convince myself it was something and not nothing. Because everything I experienced with it was like I couldn't explain it. So
that's crazy.
Yeah. What it was with the hurricane, and even if you can't pull it up, it's okay. It hadn't made landfall yet to the center of the eye. And when it was passing over Cancun, okay, it had a pretty weak cell around the eye. Okay, it was very sporadic, very weak. As soon as the eye came into contact with the landmass, the whole entire ratio of the power of that eye changed. And what it did was it broke off into mini toruses all around the eye and then shoved all of the energy into a really, really powerful cell to then surround the eye. It was super fascinating. But what was strange about it is you could see the spiraling of the hurricane, but then once it started touching that eye, it was just throwing others like cell toruses off of it, and you could see it on the radar. It was very, very neat. Sorry again, but for purposes of scientific conversation, it was
absolutely. I love it.
Extraordinarily fascinating. And then it actually intensified around the eye of the hurricane immediately after it made that landfall and started shoving off of the landmass.
That's pretty cool, man.
Yeah, it's like you said, man. I have the weird stuff happen to me. I don't know why.
Probably just
if I could give you some of it, I would.
Yeah, like you said, your mind's probably open to it. You know what I mean?
Please, I look for this thing every time I drive on that road at least 3 times a week. I look for that damn thing every single nighttime I drive down that road. I'm like, come on, be back. Come on, be back. I want to get some better pictures of it or something,
Get better pictures. Want to get a ride?
Yeah.
Yeah. You got other pictures in here, Joe. What else do we have? There's
Okay, yeah. So this was more relevant when I was talking originally about some of the brain waves that they utilize through the hemisync processes.
okay.
So like the alpha state is they like pay loose attention to their commentary on the side. That says meditative creativity, relaxation. Alpha state is generally like a common waking brain state. Like if you're in a good place, you're at a normal spot, you're not doing anything crazy. That's the pretty much a baseline of where people are in consciousness. So by using combinations of deconstructive interference through these, okay, they could emanate the effect of the frequency levels that they're putting into to that side of the ear on the corresponding lobe, with the deconstructive interference making for the offset to bring your overall mental state into one of the more difficult to attain states. Well, so you end up in multiple states of consciousness simultaneously. So you would want to be able to keep, you basically want your left brain to be in like a theta state, and you want your right side of your brain to be more of like in an alpha state, but you want your overall consciousness to be in the delta range. So if you look at the chart, where theta goes from 4 to 8 and alpha goes from 8 to 12, you have to multiply those up into their appropriate octave to be audible sound. Okay, and then you need to find the ranges that overlap at those lower hertz ranges. So basically at the threshold of alpha and theta for each corresponding side, with the most minimal offset to get into a overall theta or delta state of mind, so you could be in your overall state as a deep sleep state, but your brain's still thinking. Yep. So that's how that's all represented. They have multi-frequency patterns that they put through those processes, and they could induce all sorts of different states of mind through those particular programs. I mean, the actual Monroe Institute stuff is absolutely fantastic.
Hey, Joe, real quick.
Yeah.
I saw these on there. Let's talk about this one. This is so interesting when you
Isn't that cool?
Yeah, because it shows the geometry shape in 3D and then you see it in 2D.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So you're getting actually those are four-dimensional representations, because if you look, there's internal structure, which isn't really internal structure in 4 dimensions. It's just, a force of time of the more complex shape. But to digress, when you're looking at sacred geometries 2-dimensionally, and you're thinking in terms of that, but you're looking for shape to manifest, the 2-dimensional shape to manifest as like a 4-dimensional force field. That's sort of the translation, is the shadow trick. Yeah, they have a whole bunch of these things, 3D print files and stuff for people too.
It makes a lot more sense now. Something I've seen before. So
yeah,
I always look at it as the shape on these coils and stuff. The wire is just the energy flow pattern, like the pattern in which the energy is supposed to go, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when it hits certain points to another point, it creates sound. And At that point, when it creates sound, it creates the fields, and then the fields take on the shape of the curved parts, and it puts together a whole entirely different geometry when you look at it then, because it's never flat like you think it is.
Never. No, the fields never would be because they don't exist on a two-dimensional plane.
Yeah. So, all right, let's look through the rest of the pictures here. I just thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
We had, let's see what else in here. This one was kind of like the mushroom thing.
It is, except that's those are like cross sections of a torus. So it goes right into what that mushroom image was trying to actually depict and show. So if you slice the torus up from different axes, this is what fields look like.
Gotcha. Sorry, I'm trying to read what's in the chat. Some things seem discombobulated to what's going on, so I'm trying to make sense of it. Some of it just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, well, my eyes keep darting around because I have it on my screen, and then I have it on my big monitor that's behind me too, so I can see the images in the chat. So I'm like, so I look like I'm out of my mind, looking in every which direction all the time. But no, hi people, it's just me.
That's why I changed my monitor, because I look like Stevie Wonder just doing this all day.
Yeah. Well, one day I'll learn and I'll get a proper setup. Then my eyes could look in one spot. Until then, no deal.
Yeah. So, right on. What's this? Drunk as I am. Well, I don't know. It's pretty early in the morning still. So, all right. Let's see what else we got sitting here. You had these in there, Joe. What was this? What's going on here?
So, okay. So those were when I was talking about how we perceive color opposite of the color, so to speak, color spectrum of what matter actually is, because our eyes pick up on the light reflection, not the absorption. Okay, so these were just some weird photo negatives that I found, and I split them so I could show them separately, but they have some paint on them, it's skin. That's what the eye sees. But if you go to the other image, then you could see that this is more an accurate representation of the color, so to speak, of what's the contents of the matter that the light is reflecting off of. Now, where it becomes interesting with that is that's color. But when you think about value, meaning how dark something is, obviously where places where light is absorbed most, we see darker. So even though this is a representation of what the color differential is, this also inverts the values as well. But the actuality of it is that the values that we perceive are correct, but the color is opposite. So if I could get my old photo software loaded up on my computer, which has been a challenge for me, I know how to show that, and I'd like to create some imagery showing that, because I think it would be super cool. But for now, photo negative's the best I could do.
Gotcha.
Now, the only time that's untrue, okay, is with light. Now, remember what I said. If it's a light source, if it's from emanation of light, okay, then you're seeing the color correctly.
Okay.
It's only when it's reflecting off of matter. So you know how they say the sky isn't blue? Well, that's true. Okay, that's fine. But now if you have a blue laser, okay, or a blue light source or a white light source, then you're actually seeing that correct from its point of emanation. Yeah. Yeah. Hey Nathan, I apologize if it's okay. I have to take a 5-minute break. Is that okay?
No.
I'm getting a phone call that's important. I apologize.
Well, we could probably end it here. I think we're pretty much at the
Yeah.
end.
Oh, that sounds good.
Yeah. So
Short and sweet this week, people.
yeah. So yeah, I think we went through a lot here, and it's probably best captured and left alone.
Amen.
Yeah. All right, guys. Thank you very much in the chat for hanging out with us. Joe, thank you very much for coming in here and talking with me.
Of course.
And guys, have a great day.
It's been
And
real.
we'll
Till
talk
next
later.
weekend. Take care.
Yeah.